Eli Gold, the voice of the Crimson Tide. Hope you're having a great Monday afternoon, sir. Welcome into the game in Tuscaloosa.
Thank you. Happy 226 to you.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's kind of funny how we've made this somewhat of a little holiday. But anytime we can have an excuse to talk about championships in football, we do it, right?
Exactly. That's what we do around these parts.
Yeah, and it's just so fun to go back. And I don't know what it was about that season, but there's a lot of connections. Maybe it was what they had to battle through that made this one so special for all of us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, the number of guys who had to play, as we all know, there is no formal depth chart. They publish something every Monday at noon, but, the coach has his own ideas. But, obviously some of the players who played this year had to have been on that mythical depth chart somewhere, were probably third and fourth string when the season began. And, next thing you know, they're forced into prominent roles because of injury after injury after injury. And then you've got guys who really stepped up, even though not necessarily because of injuries. Guys, Levi Wallace had an emerging season, obviously, and so many others. So, yeah, I think the fact that it was a tough year with the injury bug, that just shows how spectacularly Coach Saban and his staff have recruited over the years. Next guy up. It's a plug-and-play kind of situation, and the next guy up just took advantage of the opportunity and played very, very well.
Eli, and I don't know how you and I know I should have never done this, but at halftime I was waving the white flag. I thought it was over. Maybe I shouldn't have done it, but I looked at a couple of my media friends who were sitting at the table, and I'm like, guys, this one's over. I guess we can start getting ready for the 2018 season. But the bounce back, I guess, is another part of that made it so.
I don't think we were quite that desperate in the booth at halftime. At halftime, somebody else from the studio does the broadcast. So we all run out to the men's room, and then we just come back and wait for what was an extended halftime, for the third quarter to start. And we're all just sitting around looking at each other, and, we knew it was a difficult situation. And then I think it was Phil who probably said first, I won't be shocked to see Tua come in. And then I think I probably said, you think he'll have the guts, although I probably didn't use the word guts, to be honest with you. But I said, do you think he'll have the guts to do that? And Tom, our engineer, our producer, Tom Stipe, probably said, hey, man, he's going to do something to try and win this ball game. And Phil said, it will not shock me at all to see Tua play. And then I said, maybe Jalen does a series. And if, again, the team doesn't move, maybe then Tua comes in. So, we were playing in our own minds. This was off the air, obviously. We were just sitting around shooting the breeze. We were not totally shocked to see the quarterbacking change.
Let me ask you, was there anything that you were able to discover in pre-show practice? Did you have any indication that Tua was maybe one of their backup plans, like Coach Saban had talked to us in the press conference and said, we always knew that we could go to this if we had to? Was there any indication, any hints that you picked up on in preparation that it was possible?
Well, only that the coach had always said that, that is the backup quarterback. I mean, even in take a totally different scenario. What if, God forbid, Jalen had gotten hurt?
Sure.
Who's next? Obviously, Tua would, common sense indicated he was next. So, no, I don't think I was alerted to anything out of the ordinary by any stretch. It was just one of those deals where the team wasn't moving. And that's not a rap on a young man who had won so many ball games as a starter for Alabama. It just was a fact. The team wasn't moving. And here came, something to try and do to win the ball game. And that's, and that was the logical step.
Eli, in your preparation, do you prepare for the moment in both scenarios? What if Alabama, in other words, the adjectives that you used to describe that moment, did you kind of pre-plan some of that, or is that all just natural?
I'll tell you what we do. I'll be very honest with you. Is anything formally word for word scripted? No. Okay? but it's darn well assembled in my head. And I don't know how you work your show on a daily basis, Ryan, but our producer, Tom Stipe, is, in my mind, one of the greatest sports producers going and on radio. I've worked with a lot of them, and Tom is absolutely spectacular. And over the years, we have always, I guess the best word you'd use is a collaborative situation. We'd bounce ideas off each other. I'd write something. I'd have an idea. And what we always did, I know this will be a bit of a lengthy answer, you'll excuse me, but what we always did for national championship games was we tried to tie something in that made sense. Playing at the Rose Bowl, you wanted to say, and with Alabama, that's where all this great football began back in the 20s, and we wanted to have roses in that summation if Alabama won. And we came up with we said, let's make sure that I say something with roses. And the roses in this grand old stadium are once again crimson, was the line that I came out with. The game against Notre Dame, we wanted to, hey, we're in a beach community in Miami. You're in a beach community. I wanted to say something that had to do with water, and when you think water, you think of the tides on the Atlantic Ocean, and obviously that tied in. And we had, a crimson tide rolled up onto South Beach, and it brought with it national title number 15. Tom and I sat and talked, and we said, there's nothing about Atlanta, and this is not an ugly statement about Atlanta, but it's not on a beach. There's no major history from years and years and years gone by. And then we said to each other, look, if Bama wins, this is going to be historic for Coach Saban. It's just going to be massive for Bama, winning another national title. And we decided to just play it straight. And Tom came up with the idea of ascending to the top of the college football mountain. That was his line. And then that morning in the shower, as I often do, I went through my head. I played it in my head. And I said, do I want to use that line first and then tick off the historical elements, which is what we did? Or did I want to say, and for Alabama, their fifth national title in 9 years, for Nick Saban, Alabama has climbed the mountain or has ascended to the top of the, do I want to use it as the kicker at the end? So I verbalized that in the shower, which is what I do. I do some of my best thinking in the shower. I verbalized it in the shower and said, well, if Bama wins, we'll do it the way, use Tom's line, and then I'll start ticking off those things. And then, just because I did it, I threw in a little tribute at the very end to a gentleman who I grew up listening to and who I idolized, and who was a former voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide, the great Mel Allen, the longtime voice of the New York Yankees. His famous saying of, how about that? Anytime Mickey Mantle would hit a big homer or Roger Maris hit his 61st or whatever, he'd say, how about that? So I decided just to throw that in at the end as a little historic nod to a gentleman who I loved listening to. So that's how that came together in theory. But was it written on a piece of paper? No, you just kind of have it all muddling around in your brain and pray that it all comes out. But that line, the ascending to the top of the college football mountain, that was a Tom Stipe sentence that was authored.
It's almost like a poem, the way that it's comes across. And but to me, when you know that, like Alabama and Notre Dame, when Alabama was pounding it on the Irish, you knew that minute was, it was at some point going to happen. And
yeah, you knew in the first quarter it was over.
But how different is it when you don't know? I mean, you could have been easily describing a Georgia win, and it's that moment that you just have to kick it in to high gear and go, hey, this is what we prepared for.
And Ryan, I guess that's what you do. I am now in my early 60s. I started broadcasting professionally when I was 16 and a half. So I guess that's when you put your experience to good use. And, I got an interesting, and it's something I pride myself on, because I was prepared with that stuff rattling around in my brain. But I got an interesting text from a good friend of mine, Eric Hasseltine, who was the voice of the Memphis Grizzlies of the NBA. And then moments later, I got a text from a gentleman who I respect so heavily, Kevin Harlan, who worked for CBS and Turner, and he and I are dear friends. And I got two texts from those guys, and the one from Hasseltine, from Eric, he said, "I don't know how you did that," because he said if it were the Grizzlies who had won the NBA title on a throw from midcourt that went in and won the national title for the Grizz, he said, I would have been yelling and screaming so loudly and unintelligibly that nobody could have, they'd make fun of me. He said, what you did was spectacular. He said, you were excited, but you were understandable. And I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but I'm always cognizant in my mind that what you say is going to live on. These calls are going to go to the Bryant Museum. They're in your archives. They are on ESPN's archives and Fox Sports' archives. It's going to live on forever. So I just take a deep breath, and even in that instance, when you have no chance to pre-plan, here, bango, touchdown, game over, and you go into that wrap-up, I just sat there and I stared off into space. Honest to God, I stared off into space, and I said, all right, be calm. And all of this ran through your brain in a split second. And I took Tom's line, and then I clicked off the historical items that I clicked off, and then threw in the how about that, and that was it. And here we are now, a couple of months later, and it'll be played, I'm sure, at the stadium next season and what have you. It's a good thing I didn't screw it up, because that call will live on. And it's just, I guess it's your experience, Ryan, that hopefully will carry you through a pressure situation like that.
Oh, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. The voice of the Crimson Tide for 30 years for the University of Alabama, Eli Gold, visiting with us. And, you look back at that moment. We did a show a couple of weeks ago where we asked the listeners to call in.
Right.
What was their favorite? Is that the favorite play of all time? And many of them said that moment, because of the way that it ended, a national championship game, it was not a unanimous, but it was at least a consensus. 3 or 4 out of the 5 would pick that play. That moment in time was their favorite moment. Where does that moment rank for you?
Wow. That's a good question. I think the answer, by the way, if you would ask me what I thought that your listeners would say, I would think the answer was probably generationally based. The older listeners, I would think, might have selected something else potentially. Van Tiffin's 52-yarder to beat Auburn, maybe a Stabler run in the mud, something like that. So oftentimes those answers are generationally based. That one was right up there. It was right up there, obviously because of the spontaneity of the play with the national title on the line. Another of the top 3 or 4 would obviously have been Terrence Cody's field goal block against the Tennessee Vols to win that game. If that hadn't happened, there would not have been a national championship likely that year. I always remember the big throw to Roy Upchurch down at Auburn, because anytime Bama can wander in and win at Jordan Hare, that makes it a huge, And of course, when you term it memorable, there's a difference between memorable and favorite.
Sure.
The kick 6 at Auburn will be memorable. It sure as heck ain't my favorite. No way, shape, or form. But that was a memorable call and a most remarkable weird play. So it also is depending upon how you phrase the question. Memorable versus favorite are two different things that they often can crisscross. But yeah, the Tua to Devontae one is if it's not number one, it's number 1A. That's for sure.
Well, you even seen Coach Saban react post-game.
Oh, it was unreal.
Yeah, I mean, his reaction, and even the way he said, "I've never been happy as I am right now in my life."
Yeah, and it took, I don't know what it was like. I don't know if you were still up in the press box or if you were already down on the field or whatever, but you saw it. I saw this happen, and it happened in the end zone closest to our broadcast booth. It happened, and it took me a half second to realize what the heck had happened. I said, oh, my God, I'm saying this to myself, oh, my God. And then you go into your reaction. It did it. I mean, I'm sure it looked like that for the coach as well. It took him like a half second to, oh my God, we just won the national title. And then he, threw the headsets and took off, and then the rest was party time. So it was quite the remarkable evening. It sure was.
Yeah, it was great. And just for a minute, I mean, obviously I'm a biased member of the media, but just for a couple of seconds, I mean, you almost had to snap yourself back because you get caught up in the moment. And I guess that's what's so beautifully done by your call is you did not allow that moment to take over, because I think I'd have been speechless. I mean, but obviously with your experience, you described it so magnificent.
Yeah,
as you
like
always
I said,
do.
you can't allow yourself to get speechless, but how many times have we all heard these calls on the radio where these people, whoever they are, start yelling so wildly,
sure, you're
so
right,
crazily that, A, you can't understand what they're saying, and B, the anchor on when they're playing that highlight always ends up laughing at the guy. Well, I don't want to get laughed at, number one, and I owe it to my client, if you want to just break it to a business sense, that the University of Alabama is a client along with my employer and, of course, the group that I love. But if you want to make it strictly business, you owe it when you're on the air to give your client the best broadcast that you can. And, of course, in this case, with the emotion and knowing that this will be played forever, you just have to keep your cool. And that's something we learn in our business, Ryan, because when you're doing a print piece, the guys who are writing the columns and who write them so well, they hit that backspace key a lot to create, to take care of their misspellings, or, hey, I didn't like that sentence, and they'll delete it and they'll hit the backspace key. In our business, we don't have a backspace key. We're working without a net. When you say it, those words disappear into that microphone and they're gone. You can't bring them back. And I guess we are trained over all these years to think like that and react the way we did. But I was thrilled the way the call came out, and I was thrilled as heck that Bama was on the right side of that one. That was quite the ball game.
Eli, thank you again for spending some time with us. Certainly you mean a lot to Alabama fans.
You're very kind, Ryan.
I could not think of a better way to start this special edition show. Thank you again, Eli, for being a part of the show.
It's my pleasure, and thanks to all your listeners for tuning in. And, hey, before we know it, it'll be the A-Day broadcast. So I dare say that we'll look back and look ahead on that Saturday. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I think it's 54 days, so get ready for that one.
There you go. All right, we'll be ready.